So, when General Motors was racing to develop the Chevy Volt, their traditional project schedule mathematically guaranteed that the car would be obsolete before it, even hit the assembly line.
Right. The timeline was just completely unworkable.
Exactly. It was just way too long. And to save the project, they couldn't just tell everyone to, work faster. They had to literally break the standard rules of time and sequencing.
Yeah, they had to totally reinvent how they layered the work.
Right. And today, we are looking at how to do exactly that. So welcome to today's deep dive. We're unpacking a comprehensive guide on developing a project schedule.
Specifically, we're zooming in on Chapter 6, which covers project networks.
Yeah, and our mission for you today, as you listen, is pretty simple. We are going to explore how to take a really static, kind of lifeless to-do list and transform it into this dynamic living roadmap that it actually bends time to your advantage.
I mean, that Chevy Volt story is just the perfect entry point because it highlights a trap that, honestly, almost everyone falls into.
Oh, for sure.
People think that if they have a meticulously detailed list of tasks, like what project managers would call a work breakdown structure or WBS, they think that means they have a solid plan.
Right, because it looks official. It's all typed out.
Exactly. But a WBS only tells you what needs to be done. It's really just a catalog of deliverables. It's entirely static.
It just sits there.
Yeah. A project network, on the other hand, which is the mechanism we are exploring today, that tells you exactly how those tasks interact in time and, physical space.
I look at my own task lists and I see the flaw in this immediately. If a work breakdown structure just gives me all the work packages, it's basically just the ingredients list for a cake.
That's a great way to put it.
Right, I have flour, sugar, eggs, and frosting. But without a network, I don't have the recipe that dictates, I cannot logically frost the cake before I bake it.
Right, and that inescapable logic of sequence is exactly what the network provides. You have to extract those individual work packages from your static list and build a visual map of dependencies.
So you have to literally map it out.
They do. Now, the sources detail a very specific way. This is often done in practice for, say, small to medium projects, like anywhere from 25 to 100 activities.
Okay.
It's called the yellow sticky approach.
Yeah, and I read this and immediately thought it sounded kind of archaic. You get a massive whiteboard, a facilitator, and you have your team physically write tasks on yellow Post-it notes.
Slapping stickies on a board.
Exactly. Slapping stickies and drawing arrows between them with markers. I mean, in an era where we have incredibly powerful scheduling software right in our pockets, why on earth would you force a team into a room with physical office supplies?
Well, it's all about the human element. I mean, the software will calculate whatever you tell it to, but it won't negotiate reality.
Oh, interesting.
Right. By bringing the team into a room and having them physically place those sticky notes, you are building this shared consensus of reality.
Okay, that makes sense.
For project managers, every one of those sticky notes represents an activity. And an activity is just an element that consumes time.
So it could be a person working, or it could be waiting for concrete to dry.
Exactly, or waiting for a permit to clear. When a team member physically places a note that says pour foundation, and then they have to draw an arrow to someone else's note that says frame walls, it sensitizes everyone.
It makes it real.
Highly real. Very early on, they see how their specific piece of the puzzle impacts the person standing right next to them.
So it forces them to basically make eye contact with the person they're going to completely delay if they mess up their own task.
Exactly. It creates profound psychological buy-in. You're giving the team direct input into the schedule they will eventually have to execute.
Okay, so we have our team in a room, we've got the whiteboard, and we're putting stickies up.
Oh.
But we need some sort of standardized language to map this out, right? Otherwise, it's just a chaotic collage of Post-its.
Oh, yeah, it would just be a mess. The dominant method for creating this map is called Activity on Node, or AON methodology.
Activity on node. Got it.
And the visual language is incredibly straightforward. The nodes, which are your sticky notes or boxes, represent the activities.
Right.
And the arrows connecting them represent the dependencies and the overall flow of time. When you are placing a node on this map, you're constantly interrogating it with 3 basic relationship questions.
And these are based on predecessors, successors, and concurrent activities, right?
Exactly.
So you're basically asking, what absolutely must finish before I can start this thing? What is waiting on me to finish? And what can happen parallel to my task.
You nailed it. And as you draw these arrows, the sources point out that distinct shapes start to form on the whiteboard.
Like actual geometric shapes.
Kind of, yeah. You get what they call merge activities, where multiple paths converge into a single box. And then you get burst activities, where one box finishes and suddenly, boom, it unlocks multiple parallel paths downstream.
I love that visual. A merge and a burst.
Yeah, those shapes are basically the structural load-bearing beams of your project network. But to make this architecture hold up, you have to follow strict rules of network logic.
Do I lay 'em on me?
Well, first, time always flows left to right.
Makes sense.
Second, you cannot loop an arrow backward to repeat a task. You can't go back in time.
Wait, here is a rule I have to push back on, though. The guide strictly states no conditional statements. No, if this fails, do that.
Right.
None.
But any project manager knows that reality is entirely made of ifs and buts. If we're supposedly mapping reality, why can't my project network have a backup plan built right into the visual map?
Yeah.
Like, what if the prototype fails testing?
I get that, but I'll counter that by asking you to think about what a schedule actually is.
Okay.
A project network is a map of expectations. It is not a decision tree.
Oh, a map of expectations.
Right. The moment you introduce conditional statements like, if the prototype fails, go back to design, the entire mathematical process of predicting a final completion date shatters.
Because you can't calculate it anymore. Exactly. You cannot calculate a timeline if your path is constantly fracturing into all these hypothetical alternate realities.
Because then the answer to, when will this project be done, just becomes, well, I mean, it could be Tuesday or it could be next year, depending on the prototype.
Yeah.
You lose the entire baseline.
Precisely. The network represents your most reasonable, logical assumption of how the project will unfold under expected conditions.
So what happens when things do go wrong?
If reality changes, say the prototype actually does fail, then you revise the network, you adapt, but you do not map the failure into the initial timeline.
It makes total sense. We need a rigid spine to work from. So, okay, the map is drawn on the board. The logic is flawless. Now we actually have to figure out exactly how long this whole endeavor is going to take.
This is where we bring in the math.
Right. The guide introduces the forward pass and the backward pass. And, looking at the formulas, early start plus duration equals early finish, it honestly looks like a math test at first glance.
It does look intimidating on paper.
But it's actually much more grounded in physical constraints, isn't it?
It is entirely about physical reality. The forward pass simply calculates the earliest possible times things can happen as you move left to right across your board.
Just adding up the days.
Exactly. But the math only gets tricky or interesting when you hit a constraint, specifically a merge activity.
Where all the arrows come together.
Right. The strict rule of the forward pass is that when multiple paths merge into a single node, you must carry forward the largest early finish of the preceding activities.
Okay, let's ground this in the real-world example from the text for you listening, because this clicked for me when I read it.
Yeah, let's do the warehouse one.
Right. Imagine you are building an automated warehouse order picking system. Deep in this complex network, you have a crucial merge activity. Let's call it integrate systems. And it's waiting on 3 separate parallel paths to finish before it can start. Path A is build and test hardware, which will finish on day 85. Path B is develop patent request, finishing on day 50. And Path C is test software, which finishes on day 70.
So if you are the manager of this project, on what day can you actually start integrating those systems?
Well, the software team is knocking on my door on day 70 saying, hey, we're ready. But I can't integrate their software into hardware that literally doesn't physically exist yet.
Exactly.
The hardware team is dragging all the way until day 85. So the start date for integration is handcuffed to day 85. I have to carry that largest number forward because that represents the longest physical constraint.
That is the absolute essence of the forward pass. You trace the longest paths through every single merge until you hit the final activity, and that gives you the expected completion date for the entire project.
And then we're done.
Not quite. To truly understand your project's vulnerabilities, you have to turn around and do a backward pass.
To find the latest times.
Right, the late start and late finish dates.
So we take that final deadline we just figured out, and we trace all the arrows backward, subtracting the duration of the tasks as we go right to left.
Yes. And just like the forward pass had a rule for merges, The backward pass has a critical rule for burst activities.
Those are the ones that split off into multiple paths.
Correct. When you're tracing backward from right to left, if you hit a burst activity, a task that unlocks multiple downstream paths, you must carry back the smallest late start of those succeeding activities.
Because if you miss the deadline for the very earliest downstream task, you trigger a chain reaction, right? You delay that specific path, which ultimately pushes the final project deadline outward. It's all about protecting the most vulnerable dependencies.
That's spot on. And when you complete those two passes forward and backward, you reveal the most important hidden structure in your entire project.
The big reveal.
The math exposes the holy grail of project management, the critical path.
The critical path. The longest path through the network. The uninterrupted chain of activities where the early finish date perfectly equals the late finish date.
Meaning those specific activities have zero flexibility, zero slack. If an activity on the critical path is delayed by a single hour, the final delivery of your entire project is delayed by a single hour.
Wow. Okay, let me pose a logical trap for you then.
All right, let's hear it.
Let's say I'm managing a massive software rollout, and I analyze my network, do all my passes, and I discover I don't just have one critical path. I have 4 different critical paths running parallel to each other.
Oh, boy.
Initially, I'm thrilled. I'm thinking, look at this utter efficiency. Every resource is maxed out. No one is sitting around waiting. There is zero wasted time across the board.
That's a brilliantly optimized project, right?
It is a brilliantly optimized recipe for a nervous breakdown.
Really?
Oh, absolutely. What you are describing is a highly sensitive network. In project management, sensitivity actually reflects the fragility of your schedule.
Fragility.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
A network with multiple critical paths, or paths with near zero slack, is a massive high-risk liability. Because, I mean, a single traffic jam, one sick day, or a delayed shipment on literally any of those 4 paths instantly blows up the final deadline.
Exactly. You would have to constantly monitor every single moving part simultaneously. It's totally unmanageable. An insensitive network is what you actually want.
Insensitive is better?
Far better. That's a network with only one critical path and significant breathing room on all the other parallel paths. It gives you the structural flexibility to absorb the inevitable shocks of reality without ever having to revise that final D-date.
And that breathing room is what the guide calls slack or float, right?
Right. Yeah.
And for anyone listening who manages a team or a household or just their own chaotic workload, the distinction the sources make between the 2 types of slack is a total game changer. There is total slack and there is free slack.
This distinction is everything. It separates amateur managers from master tacticians. Total slack is the amount of time an activity can be delayed without delaying the final project end date. But the vital catch is that total slack is like a communal checking account. It is shared across a chain of sequential activities.
So if my team is on a path with 3 sequential tasks and we have 15 days of total slack, that sounds great. We have a 15-day cushion.
It does sound great.
But if the person handling the very first task runs 10 days late, they just spent 10 days of our shared slack. The next 2 people on the chain only have 5 days of flexibility left between them.
Which means total slack demands massive communication. If you consume total slack, you are basically obligated to call every single downstream manager on your path and inform them that their schedules just shrunk. Their safety nets are gone.
It requires all this coordination and usually causes a lot of friction. But then we have free slack.
Free slack. Free slack is your private stash of time. It is the amount of time an activity can be delayed without delaying the start of any immediate successor.
So it's just yours.
Just yours. Structurally, free slack almost always occurs at the very end of a chain of activities, right before they hit a merge node.
Okay, going back to our warehouse example. My software team finished on day 70. But the hardware team isn't done until day 85. So the software team is basically just sitting there at the merge node for 15 days.
Right.
Those 50 days are free slack.
And the real tactical advantage of free slack is silence. If you have free slack, you can delay your task, and you do not have to tell anyone. You don't trigger any downstream consequences.
This is huge for resource management. Like, if I know a specific task has 5 days of free slack, and suddenly another department is facing a catastrophic failure on the critical path,
You can swoop in.
I can quietly loan them my best engineer for 3 days.
Yeah.
My task will finish a bit later, but still well before the merge node requires it. So I can shift resources, put out fires, and play the hero without causing a ripple of panic across the rest of the schedule.
It allows for isolated, localized flexibility. That is exactly why mapping the network manually is so powerful. It shows you exactly where you have the hidden leverage to maneuver.
Okay, so we've drawn the map, we've done the math, we've found the critical path,
Yeah.
we know where our secret pockets of free slack are hiding. But what happens when you take this mathematically perfect network to upper management? They look at the final completion date and they say, we need it a month faster.
Right, the classic management demand.
How do you compress time when the physical constraints basically say it's impossible?
Well, when management demands you bend reality, you have to move beyond standard finish-to-start relationships. You have to deploy advanced network techniques and change how activities overlap.
The sources mentioned a few tools for this. Let's start with lags.
A lag is simply the minimum amount of time a dependent activity must be delayed. Think about a finish-to-start lag on a construction site.
Okay.
Say activity A is pour concrete.
Right.
Activity B is frame walls. Standard logic says as soon as A finishes, B starts, but in reality, you can't frame walls on wet cement.
Right, you just sink into it.
Exactly. You must introduce, say, a 2-day lag for curing. You aren't assigning human resources to cure the cement. It's just the mandatory passage of time. Lags are crucial for representing things like shipping times or waiting for legal approvals without artificially inflating your actual work hours.
But lags mostly represent delays, right? What if we want to aggressively speed things up? I loved the visual of laddering in the guide. Standard logic dictates you have to finish an entire activity before starting the next one. Laddering asks, what if we break the predecessor into smaller chunks?
The classic application here is laying pipe.
Oh yeah, explain this one.
So if you have a contract to lay a mile of pipeline, the traditional sequential method is grueling. First, you dig a 1-mile trench. Once the entire mile is completely dug, the pipe team comes in and lays a mile of pipe. Then the refill team covers the whole mile.
It's a massive bottleneck. The pipe team is literally just sitting around for weeks while the French is dug.
Exactly. Laddering breaks that rigidity. You divide the 1-mile trench into thirds. The moment the excavators finish digging the first third, the pipe-laying team instantly moves into that completed segment. Meanwhile, the excavators have moved ahead to dig the second third. When drawn on a network, these overlapping dependencies look like the steps of a ladder.
So you are compressing the total project duration by letting sequential teams work simultaneously in isolated segments.
Precisely. And if you take that concept of overlapping and push it to its absolute chaotic limit, you get fast tracking or concurrent engineering.
Right.
This utilizes a start-to-start relationship. You don't wait for the first task to finish, you just wait for it to start, add a tiny lag, and launch the successor immediately. Which brings us all the way back to the Chevy Volt.
Ah, yes, the Volt.
General Motors was facing an impossible timeline. The traditional automotive development sequence is a rigid sequential chain. Research and development finishes their entire design, then they throw the blueprints over the wall to engineering. Engineering figures out all the mechanics, then throws it over the wall to manufacturing.
And then manufacturing looks at the blueprints and says, our machines literally cannot build this shape, forcing months of expensive rework back at step one.
Exactly. It's incredibly inefficient. To bypass that, GM deployed concurrent engineering. They replaced those sequential handoffs with start-to-start relationships.
So they were all working at the same time.
Yes. Specialists from manufacturing, marketing, and engineering were in the room while R&D was drafting the initial designs. Manufacturing was giving real-time feedback on buildability before the blueprints were even finished.
Wow.
It is a highly chaotic, highly communicative parallel approach, but it allowed them to shatter their timeline and complete the project ahead of schedule.
The trade-off is risk, though, right? I mean, you might start engineering a part based on an early design that eventually changes, leading to wasted work.
Yes, there's a lot of rework potential.
But if time is your absolute constraint, it's a necessary gamble. Now, there's one more quirky trick in the sources that I want to touch on before we wrap up. Hammock activities.
Oh, hammock activities are fascinating. Because their duration is not estimated up front, it is entirely derived from the network map after it's already drawn.
How does that work?
Well, a hammock activity spans a specific segment of a project. It literally hangs between the early start of the first activity in a phase and the early finish of the last activity in that phase.
Like a literal hammock tied between two trees.
Exactly.
But what is the actual mechanism here? Why do we care about tying a hammock between tasks?
It is primarily a mechanism to control indirect financial bleed.
Oh, overhead costs.
Right. Let's say you need to rent an incredibly expensive piece of heavy machinery or, I don't know, hire a high-priced inspection consultant just for one specific phase of a project. You create a hammock activity for them. If the first tree, the start of the phase, and the second tree, the end of the phase, are 20 days apart, the hammock is 20 days long. You budget for 20 days of rental fees.
But if things go wrong and the individual tasks within that phase get delayed.
The trees move further apart, the hammock stretches. If
Ah,
the phase stretches to 30 days, the hammock activity automatically recalculates, showing you instantly that you are now paying for 30 days of that rented machinery. It doesn't affect the logic of your other tasks. It just acts as a dynamic tracker for your overhead costs.
it basically visualizes the financial pain of delays in real time.
I love that.
Okay, as we bring this all together, I have to ask the elephant in the room question.
Go for it.
If I walk into a status meeting today, my manager is going to show me a hand-drawn activity on Node map. They're going to show me a Gantt chart, those cascading bar charts against a calendar timeline. If Gantt charts are the standard business tool, why did we just spend all this time learning how to manually map nodes and calculate forward passes?
Because a Gantt chart is a presentation tool, not a planning tool.
Oh, really?
Yes. Gantt charts are fantastic for giving stakeholders a quick, intuitive snapshot of where a project sits on a calendar. But they have a fatal flaw. In a complex project with hundreds of dependencies, if you try to draw the logic arrows connecting all those cascading bars, the Gantt chart turns into an unreadable, overwhelming mess of spaghetti.
Just lines everywhere.
It completely hides the critical path under visual clutter. The project network is the master tool where the actual logic is engineered.
But again, I can buy software for like $50 that will map the network, do the forward pass, find the free slack, and generate a beautiful Gantt chart in 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Why do I personally need to understand the math?
Blind trust in software is one of the most dangerous things a project manager can engage in.
Dangerous.
Highly. Yes, the computer handles the arithmetic instantly. But if you do not fundamentally understand the underlying logic of how a network resolves time, if you don't intuitively grasp the physical constraints of a merge activity or the fragility of a sensitive network, you have no way to verify the software's output.
So if you put garbage in,
Exactly. If you make a single logic error in your data entry, the software will not correct you. It will happily and instantly generate a perfectly formatted, mathematically precise, utterly catastrophic schedule.
wow.
You must have the conceptual knowledge to look at a printout and recognize when the output defies physical reality. You have to be smarter than the tool.
You can't just outsource your critical thinking to an algorithm.
Never.
So let's look at the journey we've taken today. We started with a static work breakdown structure, a lifeless list of ingredients. We used the yellow sticky approach to build psychological buy-in and logically sequence those tasks, really transforming them into a dynamic activity on node project network. We mapped the rigid spine of our project by doing the math, the passes, and finding the critical path.
We did.
We learned how to find the hidden leverage of free slack to solve problems quietly. And finally, we explored how to bend reality and compress time using tools like laddering and concurrent engineering.
It really is a profound evolution in how you control your work. And, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Not about corporate projects, but about your own life.
Oh, turning it inward.
Always. We've spent this time analyzing the mathematical sensitivity of schedules. I want you to take a hard look at your own weekly calendar. Have you accidentally engineered a highly sensitive network for your own life?
Oh, that is a confronting question.
Think about it, though. If every single task you do in a day, your meetings, your errands, your deep work, your family obligations, is sitting right on your personal critical path with absolutely zero total or free slack between them, you haven't engineered a productive life.
What have you engineered?
You have engineered a schedule that is mathematically guaranteed to shatter at the very first sign of reality. A traffic jam, a spilled cup of coffee, or a late phone call will derail your entire week. So the real question to ask yourself is, where can you structurally build some free slack into your own network today?
Man, I know my personal schedule is definitely lacking some free slack. I think I need to go recalculate my own forward pass this afternoon.
We probably all do.
Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring, keep mapping out your networks, and always remember to question the information around you. We'll see you next time.